something that shouldn't have happened, but it did. There have been many variations and accounts of this story, but I was there.
Hello? Ronnie?
Yeah, I've been meaning to call you.
We came up with this idea. We're gonna bring out 5 sets of drums and 5 drummers. Have ourselves a little drum off.
What's going on?
I gotta go to Atlanta, baby.
Atlanta?
Yeah, trying out for Skynyrd.
Being the drummer of Lynyrd Skynyrd every day on the road was a hilarious adventure. We knew these songs backwards and forwards so well that we only had to think about how hard we wanted to hit it.
I'm the co-pilot. All I've ever dreamed of doing is flying a big rig with rock stars. After this, I'll be able to die a happy man. All right.
Not what was coming next.
We need an airport. We are running low on fuel and just about out of it.
Love you guys.
It didn't feel like the end of the world at the time. It felt like we're gonna go on. We're gonna be survivors. This is more than a story about the plane crash. It's about the music of Lynyrd Skynyrd, the greatest Southern rock band of all time. The last night that we played, that Ronnie ever sang Free Bird, I had the whole band and crew over to my house for vegetarian spaghetti and salad that my wife Patricia made. None of the band members showed up, and so in the movie where I say, well, that's just more for all of us.
Right.
You know, one of the crew members go, let's just say they stayed up all night.
Right.
You know, and I said, hey, that's more for us. Of course, that really happened. You know, so the movie is very personal for me, but I wanted to be able to get people into the movie, into the credits. All my sons, my Chris and Marshall, and my son River, giving a nod to Chris and Marshall in that movie, and they wrote these prominent, amazing songs. That was important. Getting Ed King's name into the credits.
Yeah.
That was important. Getting Ed King involved in some of the music, even though his wife tried to sue us, or threatened to sue us, you know, if we mentioned his name. That was important.
Wow.
So, you know, we did her wishes. We took Ed's name off of the song,
Right.
but Ed was portrayed in the movie by an actor at one point, just a very quick scene, and so his name was in the credits, and she can't sue us for that.
Sure.
But of course she'll try, because power and greed just rule the day, especially in Nashville. For me to get my father's name, because there was a man that portrayed my father, a ghostly image of my dad.
I wanted to ask you about that, if you don't mind. There's a couple scenes in the film that I wanted to ask you about. That was one of them, and you had mentioned that, you know, one of your sons, the song that he wrote was playing there, and that scene where you guys are pulling up on the runway and getting ready to take off, and it's the 2 big black Cadillacs and all. And in the scene, you know, you guys were kind of just getting ready to do your thing and take off, and you were talking to Alan Collins before you took off, and mentioned to him like that there was a kind of a weird vibe there, because that was just over there, you said, was you know, the last place I ever saw my father. And like you just mentioned, there was an actor that portrayed your father, and I assume that is all true. And can you tell me about that? I mean, I didn't realize that. I know I remember hearing that your father had passed away in a plane crash, but nothing more than that. I don't think anybody really knows. And so.
Well, we were sitting on the tarmac there in Greenville, South Carolina. Alan Collins and I were smoking a big fat doobie. We were looking out at the door where I had last seen my father. He was a pilot as well, and he was killed in a mid-air plane collision in Albuquerque, New Mexico, when I was still a sergeant in the Marines.
Wow.
And so when we were sitting there in Greenville, that actually happened where I looked over, and I was telling Alan, I said, right about in there is where Dad's Beechcraft Baron was waiting for he and the company pilot, and that was the last place I saw Dad. I was going to be a captain in the Marines, go to Marine Corps Flight School, after Quantico, Virginia, and that was the dream for me and my dad, for me to fly for the Marines. And then once Dad was killed in that mid-air plane collision, my dream I lost that dream of being a pilot. All of that kind of went out the window, and I became the drummer of a rock band. So how does that happen? But my dad supported me all through my musical career. He bought me my first set of drums. So for me to get to remember that moment, telling Alan, I saw my dad there for the last time, and then they put that really cool old biplane in the background. I love that. I love every kind of airplane there is. I've flown jets, I've flown hang gliders and everything in between. So
wow.
With my uncle Sammy J. Williams, we used to land on a grass field. I had my first airplane crash with my uncle Sammy J. Williams.
Not too many people can say I had my first airplane crash, Artimus.
Well, I was 12. It really meant a lot to have an actor playing my father. Because Ronnie Van Zant let me write the liner notes of Give Me Back My Bullets, and I dedicated it to Charlie Daniels, my good friend, and Marshall Tucker. And Ronnie, how often does a guy like Ronnie Van Zant and a guy like me,
right,
where Ronnie says, hey, man, would you write the liner notes to our new album?
You were the new guy at that point, too, right?
I was the new guy, and for him, that was such an honor.
Wow.
And that's how Ronnie felt about me, and that's how I felt about Ronnie. My relationship with Ronnie was different than his with who I call the kids.
Yeah.
And that was Gary and Alan and Leon and Billy.
Right.
Ronnie would abuse the kids, and he didn't mess with me as much because, he knew that I'd slap him back.
You were a badass from the Marines. He was.
I won't say that I'm a badass, but I will say that I am a Marine.
Yeah.
And if somebody punches me, I'll punch them back.
You got that right.
The rest of the kids, they would take it. And Ronnie, I watched him abuse them, and I went to their defense many times. I went to Gary Rossington, Rossington's defense many times. Ronnie would get drunk and abuse them. So my relationship was different with Ronnie. I wouldn't pull power plays in front of people, in front of the band, by trying to dictate to Ronnie something that I felt should be done in the band, like not punching the other band members in the face.
Right.
I thought that was a good start. And Ronnie and I physically fought 3 times. And he realized that, that if he hit me, he got hit back.
Right.
And there would be blood. and so Ronnie was a great person when he hadn't been drinking. Anybody that drinks, me, you, anybody that drinks too much is going to end up kind of acting goofy.
Sure.
Or maybe even go into the asshole realm.
Sure, it happens.
But I'm the only guy that he smoked weed with. He'd smoke a joint with me. But not anybody else, because he knew that he'd be giggling and letting his hair down, and Ronnie wanted to keep that mystique.
Sure,
he wanted to keep the mystique of Ronnie Van Zant, the badass, and he was a badass. Undoubtedly, he was a badass. But I really miss Ronnie, and you had hit on something. If Ronnie were here now, there would be quite a few people getting a spanking.
Yeah, no doubt.
There'd be quite a few girls and boys, let's say men and women, say Ronnie would, take care of business.
At least, right?
But my connection with Charlie Daniels and Ronnie Van Zant were very, very good friends.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for Charlie Daniels, I would not be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Really?
It wasn't for Ronnie Van Zant and Charlie Daniels, because Charlie was the one that gave Ronnie the recommendation, that I met this guy, he jammed with us. Speaking of me, Charlie said, I've seen Artimus play, he's good. He might be good for your band. And it was on his recommendation that got me the gig that, where Ronnie called me up and said, man, Charlie said you're cool.
That's amazing.
So, go to Alex Cooley's Electric Ballroom.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because that was the one other scene in the movie, and I don't want to give too much away for anybody that hasn't seen it, but right towards the beginning, when you get the call from Ronnie, or actually you got the call from Dean Kilpatrick, I guess, after you've been waiting to do this drum-off thing, and he says, come on down to Cooley's, right?
From Ronnie.
Right.
I first got the call from Ronnie.
Right. But then afterwards... like the drum off.
He wanted to bring 5 drummers and 5 sets of drums to Florida,
right,
and have a drum off, and I thought that was a great idea.
Sure, yeah.
I was ready, but then he called me back and said, "Hey, man, situation has changed, and go to Atlanta. See Ed King, and
right,
this is where and when." What is your question?
Well, I laughed out loud. I backed it up a couple of times, because this is a story that I've, again, seen every interview and every documentary and all this. But on the way to jam with the guys at Cooley's to show them what you had, something happened to your van. Can you tell everyone about that little? And my question is, did that really happen, and what happened?
Of course, it really happened, and everything in the movie really happened. There's just a couple of Hollywood things,
sure,
that they did to embellish the story, but everything had a basis in fact. So when I got the call to go to Atlanta, I loaded up my drums. I was whipping the horses to Atlanta to get to this audition.
Right.
And I had a black Volkswagen microbus. They couldn't get a black Volkswagen microbus, so they used some other kind of van. I think it was a Ford Econoline.
Yep.
But it was actually a Volkswagen microbus that I bought when I got out of the Marine Corps, and I painted it Emerald black. By the time I got to Atlanta on Peachtree, I got what is called vapor lock, because on an air-cooled engine, if you run it pretty hot, it'll vapor lock on you.
So you were hauling ass, and this thing just started running too hot and vapor locking.
It ran too hot, and I got 4 blocks away from Alex Cooley's Electric Ballroom,
right,
and it was on Peachtree across from the Fox Theater. And 4 blocks away, at a traffic light, my Volkswagen microbus vapor locked and shut down.
Oh, God.
It would not restart. So I turned the key off, I put on the emergency blinkers, and it took me 4 trips to take my drums, hand carry all of my equipment down the street to the Electric Ballroom, and where Ed King and Leon Wilkerson were waiting,
wow,
bass and guitar. We were a power trio that day, and Ronnie wanted to just know how good I was, whether I was good enough.
Wow.
And it took me 4 trips.
I was so hoping.
I got them all, down there, and then 4 hours later, after the jam session was over, and Ed King had made me the best Caesar salad I'd ever eaten in my life. He was a connoisseur. Ed was a master of many things, not just playing guitar. Ed was amazing. He was a very high-intellect individual, and he made me the best Caesar salad. I will never forget the taste of that Caesar salad.
That's incredible.
And then 4 hours later, I went down where my Volkswagen bus was sitting. I didn't care if it had been towed. I didn't care if somebody had stolen it.
Yeah.
I was going to make that audition no matter what, because I loved the music. And Charlie Daniels, I wanted to make him proud because I loved Charlie, and he believed in me. My Volkswagen bus was still sitting there.
Oh, really?
There was still battery power with the blinkers.
I had wondered if you'd have found it up on blocks by the time you got back there, being right in Atlanta.
Dude, that's funny you should say that, because I've always said I didn't care if I found it up on blocks. I didn't care if it wasn't there, if it's stolen or towed. But it was still sitting there, and I got in, and I put the key in, and I turned the key, and it fired right up.
Cranked up. How awesome. I'm so glad that really happened, because that was one of my favorite scenes in the whole thing. And all that came to mind was, look at this guy. He's so many different instances of, like, if you could sum up Artimus Pyle in one word, what would it be? And for me, it would be relentless. because, like, you're trying out for Skynyrd. You got the opportunity of a lifetime. Your van breaks down, and so many people would say, well, I guess it's not in the cards, but not Artimus Pyle. He'd start grabbing drums out of the back of the van and taking off on foot 4 blocks away and made 4 trips. That's insane.
That's right.
Unbelievable.
I did it. And relentless is a good word, and I thank you for that word. If I were to describe myself in one word, it would be idiot. I'm an idiot.
Come on now.
I'm a 100% dyed-in-the-wool idiot. I'm very, very gullible. I trust everyone I meet, which is kind of a character flaw. I'm glad you got a kick out of that part of the movie, because it is absolutely true. And someday when we're off the record,
sure,
I'll tell you another little story connected to that I will not share with the public at this time.
Well, I would love to hear
it. I'll tell you. But, I really appreciate you allowing me to talk about the movie. And I want to stress this, Ryan. I don't hate Judy Van Zandt. I don't hate Gary. I don't hate his wife. I don't hate Vector Management. I wish they would have seen enough in me to realize that I was someone that they could have invested a little bit of faith in, and we would have gone a long way together. They chose the road of exclusion, greed, and fraud. So I'm sorry about that, but that was their decision, and I can't change their mind. I am relentless in the fact that they probably thought by abandoning me and the horrible false charges that were brought against me in Florida, that if I was a bad guy, believe me, I'd be in prison, on a charge made against me worse than murder. And I faced it alone. My band, my friends, not my immediate family, but most of my family turned their back on me and left me for dead.
Wow.
Certainly the music business, all the Southern rock bands, and I'm talking about every single Southern rock band that used to say, Artimus, we love you. You're a great father, a drummer, a Marine. You're a cool guy. You smoke good weed. We love you. They all turned their back on me to the man. And these are people, men and women, that I thought would have my back for the rest of my life. There's a lot of every man for himself, and greed and drugs, cocaine in particular. I've seen it just ruin everything and everybody, and it makes me sick. But it had to be in the movie. What we were portraying, it was the 60s and the 70s, and it was definitely sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah, no doubt.
And it wasn't all pretty. It wasn't all pretty, and it wasn't all just fun. And maybe Hollywood, overdid it with some of the nudity. I mean, we didn't stand around all the time in rooms with completely butt-naked girls with their cooters hanging out. Right. There was a lot of naked breasts. That was all true. But we weren't we weren't Led Zeppelin. They would just stand around with like 50 butt-naked girls,
I love that you were in the film itself too. Like, I understand there's an actor portraying you, but at the beginning and in the trailer, hearing your voice saying, this shouldn't have happened, but it did, and I was there. Like, hearing your voice say that, it made the hair stand up on my arms, and I'm really, really glad that they put you yourself in the film, kind of not so much narrating, but every now and again you'd pop up there and kind of explain what was going on or whatever. And I'm really glad that you yourself were in the film. You did a really great job.
Thank you for that, Ryan. I appreciate it, because, that wasn't my idea, but they thought that there's 20 documentaries about Lynyrd Skynyrd.
Yeah.
And this film was not a documentary. It's a live-action film.
Right.
However, by putting my narration and my voiceover and some of the screenovers that they did where I was actually on screen,
right,
some of that stuff, it kind of almost like my narration was helping to bridge some of the things that we didn't have the budget to put in another 20 minutes or the time to put in to explain something. So they used my kind of voiceovers and screen time to bring it along. I don't think it put it into complete documentary territory. It was a live-action film.
But it made it real, though. You know what I mean? Like, you could get really lost in just watching a film, just in getting into the story. And then when they would cut away and bring you back, it reminds people that this isn't just a story. It's not a group of writers in a room. That this really happened, and it. For me, it was a reminder of that, that this isn't just a story. Like, all of these things really happened, and it made it real again,
I think that's a great analogy, and I'm glad that you are able to see what we were doing in the film. Now, when you see the behind the scenes, there's a bonus feature that's, I won't say it's as good as the movie,
right,
but it's really, it's good. It shows you what we went through, everybody, to try to get this movie done, with the lawsuits that were against us the entire time. At one point, I had gone to Charlie Daniels and tried to get through to Charlie and talk to him, face to face.
Right.
When we did shows with Charlie a couple of years ago. We did an indoor at a theater, and we did a show where we played for about 40,000 people. And both times, I had mentioned to Charlie that I would love for him to write a song for the movie for his good friend Ronnie Van Zant. But Charlie's people that insulate him to protect their paycheck, I don't know how to explain these people's minds.
Yeah.
But anyway, Charlie didn't get to write a song. They probably felt like, Artimus is being sued by Judy.
Sure.
Judy's got all the money.
We don't want to mix up in this.
Right. Let's not get mixed up in that. And I'm sure that was some of the reasoning. And it might not look good for you, Charlie, or whatever. But in spite of that all, your word relentless. See, I had stressed to the director that Charlie meant a lot to me and to Ronnie Van Zant, and we were on the road a lot. Charlie and I spent a lot of time smoking big fat doobies on the road with his band and crew, and my band, Gary and Alan and Leon and Billy liked to smoke weed. Gary and Alan for sure, me for sure, Steve Gaines for sure. But my point is that I was able to get Charlie Daniels' name, and I might add that my son that I live with, his name is Marshall Daniel Pyle.
Oh, wow.
And he was named after the Marshall Tucker Band and the Charlie Daniels Band.
That's beautiful.
And so I named him Marshall Daniel Pyle. That's how I felt about Charlie Daniels. I named one of my sons after him.
That is beautiful.
So, isn't that beautiful, man?
It really is.
And it's for real.
You made the hair stand up on my arms again. you have a habit of doing
Marshall, that. And Ronnie held Marshall in his arms. So Charlie's name went in the movie. On the airplane, there's a scene where there's a song called Kentucky Brother. There's dialogue over the song being played, but it's called Kentucky Brother. And,
is that where Ronnie was playing on the little boombox, saying he had some Charlie Daniels he was going to play or something like? Is that where?
Exactly.
Okay.
So it was a little tip of the hat. I mean, how many people can say Charlie Daniels is responsible for me getting into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
That's amazing.
So I was able to get Charlie's name in the movie, and Bill Stevens wrote a song for the soundtrack of the movie Street Survivors as well. And the hospital, after I called Peter Rudge and I had words with a few people about hospital bills, and there's that real high and mighty, guitar thing that hits there. That's from a piece called Six Souls. And let me tell you, Ryan, when you hear Six Souls and the beautiful song by Brian Mabry and Ed King called In Memory Of, not only will goosebumps come, but tears will come.
Oh, I bet.
Because it's incredible, powerful music. I think we have a Grammy award-winning soundtrack.